Humans of Earth, welcome to Will AI Snap That? I am your host, Michael Rollins, and I am joined as always by Thanos, he of the Snapdom. We are here to help guide you through life under your new robotic overlords. Thanos, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. We're doing whole life guidance now. I thought we're more like
I feel
tech
like
side.
AI life coach. AI life coach might be the new industry. Like, dude, can you imagine being an AI life coach influencer?
AI life coach influencer.
Yes. Yes. Just think about it.
You know,
Life coaches, man. I don't know what a
if
life
some of the
coach is.
shadier sides of life coaching weren't bad enough, just make that
Right.
come from the AI.
Right.
What could go wrong
Yeah.
there?
Yes. AI. We are your AI life coaches. Thanos, I did a thing. I cannot show it to you, but I did a thing where I took one of the images of Chad, our robotic overlord, that ChatGPT generated, and I had it cut out on a cry-cut printer, and then I made it an iron-on. It is amazing. It is fantastic, and unfortunately, I put it right here. And so it's like this weird underboob, odd, like this bit, and it does not look good.
Rapid iterations. Just have to try it
Yes,
again a little higher.
rapid iterations, but it was actually very, very cool. So we may see those, because my entire goal is we're gonna like sell people shirts or something to
Yes,
fund
flag
our
store. We're
kids'
totally at
college
that level.
education. Yeah, absolutely. All 26 of our subscribers. Speaking
27 this
of, if you
morning.
like the podcast, make sure to like us and subscribe and rate us. If you leave us reviews, it actually is a big deal. It helps the podcast. So. But Thanos, today, I have terrible, horrible news.
Lay it on me.
Claude has failed me.
Just today, for the first time.
Claude is in a like regular habit of failing me, but this is the first time that Claude actually kind of screwed me over in production.
Oh
And
boy.
that is the problem. So we at Engine Room, which this is our new logo. What do you think? We're getting ready to launch the product. We're going to bring on paid subscribers. We have quite a few creators at this point that are using the platform to help us test, right? And one of the things we realized recently is that we were matching secrets like OAuth secrets and whatnot to the channel, and we realized, no, we need to match those to the user, because we would end up with multiple copies of secrets in a table, and that was just no good. And so we did this enormous database refactor, and that included not just the database changing, but that included a lot of the collector code. And very obviously now we had to fetch by a different ID. And I had gone through and had Chad, Claude, whatever you want to call him. It's like, hey, I need you to update these so that you pull from the ID of the user versus the ID of the channel. And it did, except it missed one. And it was
an
not
important
obvious.
one?
Huh?
An important one?
I would say they're all pretty important. But the net result was that we would pull the channel ID and treat it like it was the user ID. And we had some like checks to make sure that didn't happen, but they didn't get written quite right in there. And so we caught it very fast, but we ended up pulling the wrong data into the wrong account. And it was very obvious that something wasn't right. We caught it very quickly, and we were able to change it up and sort through what was happening. But it was a giant refactor, and it was a mix of human coding and AI coding and vibe coding. Like, not just AI coding, but sheer like I need
actual vibe coding, like just do it and I'm not even looking at what comes out.
But the vibe was off. The vibe. No, everything is reviewed, but like we didn't have good.
If you review it, that's not vibe coding. So let's just get the terms
so all right.
here.
So wait. So what is our definition of vibe coding?
Yeah, because I think that gets an interesting, like a bad rap. And it's that vibe coding is you're just asking it to do stuff and you are not looking at the code. Because if you're looking at the code and you're reviewing it, that's not vibe coding. That's like coding with the AI as an assistant, and it's a different thing of its own. But vibe is just like really going with the vibe of the thing. Because people say vibe coding, doesn't work. And it's like, depends what you're doing. Vibe coding can work for like a really quick thing, but if you start using it over and over and over again without supervision, that's not going to work in the long run.
Yeah, I would say the vibe was off on this one.
Yeah.
The vibe
It sounds like it. So let me ask you this. Did you plan the refactoring, or did the AI plan the refactoring?
No, we planned the refactoring. We knew what we were doing.
That could have been your first mistake.
It's not letting the AI do it.
And half serious here, it depends, I guess, on the size of the project. But one of the techniques that I've been using is you use the AI to start off with your debating what we're going to do. Then you can plan what you're going to do with the AI, and then you actually do it with the AI, and then you get the feedback built in, and like have the AI kind of figure out what went right and what went wrong, and feed it back into some state that you can manage to deal with it. So usually if you have the AI go and do the planning, it might go catch stuff that you might not. So it's really fun. As I was doing this today, by the way, this is really cool. I installed an MCP server for Asana. So I could basically say, hey, go look at the task that is assigned to me and plan this out for me. So I don't even have to copy paste stuff in there.
Yeah.
And then it then says, oh, well, let me look at the code. Let me see how this works. Let me see how that works. So it builds enough context that it's conceivable that it might have seen all the places you were touching this channel ID and said, oh, I need to go fix those. It has pleasantly surprised me at times when you do that, when it becomes proactive in a good way, right? And it says, and I've made these changes, so let me go see if anyone's using it. And let me see if anyone's using it in this way. And it was a way I hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
So that's maybe something to try and be pleasantly surprised by it.
This was a change I knew we would have to make eventually. And we got to it at a point where it was kind of like, all right, we need to rip this Band-Aid off, right? This was originally conceived code. The entire data structure, data framework had matured from when this was written. So it is something that I knew was coming. We had already halfway planned it. I have a question about when you say let the AI plan it. Are you letting the AI plan it from like Claude Code, or are you going to like one of the desktop apps to say, this is what I'm doing, here's my database, et cetera, plan that out? Like how are you?
That is process? So like 3 weeks ago.
Oh God, what are we using now? I used Codex, it sucked.
So I'm using Klein right now, which is a VS Code plugin. Okay. And it's a free VS Code plugin. You plug it in with whatever key you want. And it looks very much like Cursor. But it has a couple of interesting things. One is it has like a set of instructions that you can give it to it that it kind of like reads every darn time. And the second thing is they have a recommended sort of pattern that I've taken a colleague's suggestions, and then I've added my own in there that make that work really, really well. So it has like all the nice integrations where it shows you the diffs of the code like Cursor does, and it goes in little chunks. But I think the innovation here that those guys started with, and then a bunch of people have improved upon, is I've created 3 files that have some context. There's a product file. This is the product. This is what it does. There's an architecture file. This is the architecture, how it works. And there's technologies file saying, here's technologies, here's some patterns that we use. Okay. And in the instructions, there it says, you will look at these 3 files before you do anything.
Interesting.
Okay. Also, I've said there is a context file, an active context file. I actually have many of these because I may be working on different projects. And every time I ask you to do something, you will go find the active context file. And if I don't give you one, you will ask me which one you want, and we will go look at that and see where we're at. So this active context file says, I'm doing a refactoring, and here's the things to do. This is how far I've gotten. And the instructions are, and if you ever get confused, you stop and you go reread all these things.
Okay.
So you can start with planning and saying, go get this ticket from over here, and then plan it out. And it will go in your context file. It will read your product architecture and so on. And then it will start creating like some ideas. You can create them, edit them, accept them, to have a discussion with them as to how you want it. And when you're done, you can say, okay, now let's go implement number 1. Yeah. And you implement number 1. And now, as you know, like you might leave this, go back, do something else, switch projects or whatever. So it's nice because at any point in time, you can say, we're pausing here, save all the state in this context file. So the next time, all you got to do is say, hey, pick it up and go right here. And it has like the fairly rich context of what you've been doing in there.
Interesting.
So and you can break this as many steps as you want. And I'll just give you one more thing, which is like I discovered this a couple of days ago, and it was awesome. The darn thing is trying to run my tests with using the wrong command. And that's just getting annoying because I did like a project and it worked. I had to correct it to do this, save the context, went over again, did it the same way. And it was also doing some like unnecessary steps in the middle. So after the third time that it was doing this in a very ineffective way, I said, hey, go back and look at what we did and figure out how to do this more effectively and write your learnings back in the context file. And it was like, I noticed that you corrected me on how to run the test command. Let me run this way. I noticed I always ran these 3 steps, but I always managed to get to the 4th one. So let me write this one.
Yeah.
And then the 4th time I did this, it just boom, 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 just nailed it.
So
that was like, it's basically like the manual way of managing context and memory and that sort of stuff that it may get better at doing themselves eventually. But dude, it's so effective. Like I can just take a new project and just crush it in a few hours with this.
So why aren't you, so you're doing this with embedded files that are in the file system? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, they basically go in source control. So if I drop a project, so I have like a client docs folder that has my 3 main files. And then in there, I have subfolders for everything that I'm working on. So I might have like 4 or 5 of these at any point in time. And each of them has the active context. So as I work on it, I'll commit it and I'll save it. And then next time I'm coming back to it, if I hadn't finished the feature, I'll pick it up from there. Because you might have multiple PRs over a single feature. And you kind of want to keep this context in between. I often find I want to sort of switch to a different project. So the original instructions for client were like you keep one active context file. But then it was, if I was doing 3 or 4 things at once, it was getting kind of mixed up.
Okay. Is there a reason you're doing it in the file system versus with a RAG server?
Tell me more about how you would do this with a RAG server.
A RAG server, RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And typically what you do is you use a vectorized database like ChromaDB is the one that I use most of the time. And you can insert a bunch of documents into it. And the LLM, as part of the prompts, can be instructed to reference the RAG server and reference the documents in the RAG server as it is generating its responses. And so one of the things that's great about these RAG databases is it generates the vector labels as it's inserting the document. And then it basically becomes like a search pattern, right?
My impression for this, though, was that you use this when you have a shit ton of documents. And you can use the RAG to cut down on how many of these, like you will make a query. And the idea of RAG is that it will go find 3 relevant documents or 5 relevant documents and use those. So it's not overwhelming your context.
Well, here's the thing. What you're doing is you're seeding the context every time with these design documents, which is not bad. Okay. But the RAG server allows you to, you get similar effects, but you don't impact the size of the context window as a result.
So how does that work under the hood? Is it not taking these documents and adding them in the context, or?
It basically, I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is that as it is, it can consult these documents. It can consult the RAG database without pulling everything in.
Right, but I think consult means find the right ones and shove in the context.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's eventually going to have to pull it into the context. Yeah. You're right.
So I think the RAG is a valid technique if you had a silly amount of docs and you wanted to include the relevant ones without including all of them. But in this case, I hadn't connected to that idea because I don't have a shit ton of docs. I have 3,
right,
or 4. It does add them to the context, and it does add a little bit to the cost, but I don't care as much of the cost as the quality. So, with Cursor, kind of my experience was you may be added for an hour, and it's like, darn it, I could have just made this change myself in less than that. Whereas now, I was just before this, I was working on creating an administrative form, and it generated it, and I'm not sure that it works yet, but it was like 600-700 lines. And I was like, it would literally take me hours to just type these lines, even if I knew what they were, and I don't.
Yep.
Now, I still need to understand what they are, but that's like a much shorter task than creating them myself.
What about, so first off, are these docs generalizable? Like, it would be interesting to see if you could share like a format or something, because I'd like to use it.
I think they're generalizable. I don't have anything I could share like this instant, but it's for new projects or new-ish projects, you can even ask the AI to generate these for you. So you can say, go look in my code base and write down the project description. I think if you can provide it yourself, it has a bit more context and it'll probably be a bit better. But I have had small projects where I can say, go figure out what this is. So for example, I was trying to do a Monte Carlo analysis. And I asked ChatGPT, hey, write me a Monte Carlo analysis for this kind of project. It was a real estate project. And it did it. And I ran it and it was like, okay, that's nice, but I'm going to need to iterate on this. So I put it in a project, told client, hey, we're now starting with this file. Like, go read it, figure out what it does. I'm going to tell you, and then write me the project description, the architecture description, the technical description. 30 seconds later, I have it, minor edits, and off you go. Now, would this work if you have like 500,000 lines of code? Probably not, but
I mean, it might. So here, one of the things is like, can you decompose the project into small enough pieces that you can generate summaries that you can then incorporate into some kind of architectural document? I will say Claude Code has like a Claude.md or something that it will use in this manner, where it's basically like, here's my instruction set for working. I want you to adhere to this the entire time. But it's funny because I actually did something very similar to this just the other day, where I've been tinkering with agents and MCP servers, and I was trying to put a RAG database behind an MCP server so that I could then attach it basically to my agent. And I don't remember I think initially I had Cursor doing it, and then I brought in Claude, and it just could not get the MCP protocol right. And every time I would fire it up, one thing, the agent would be like, I don't see your thing, or your thing's not responding. And so eventually I went and I downloaded the actual MCP protocol document, and I put it in the project. And I said, it is right here. Do this. And then all of a sudden it just worked. And I actually responded to somebody on LinkedIn recently where they were having a similar issue, and they were saying, I need to use the latest. What do I do? And my recommendation to that person was, well, what if you set up some kind of a RAG server via MCP that could, basically house all of the latest protocol definitions and things like that? Because then you kind of get around some of the recency bias that a lot of these LLMs have. Because like a lot of their data cuts off 6 months ago.
yeah.
So
Yeah, they do. There is a. Did you send this to me or someone else? There's an MCP context 7 or something like that has access to all the up-to-date documentation for all APIs and libraries, and it has like ways to get those. Okay. So whenever you say do this and it uses like 3 versions ago, you say no. Now go look at that MCP server, and it gets the latest documentation. There's a lot of fun stuff coming out of that. I loaded it on my laptop while I was out kiting last week.
Yes. Kiting. Didn't you win the dolphin kiteboard championship?
I totally did. It was the record for most dolphins spotted while kiting.
It's incredible. Dolphins are amazing. Thankfully, they didn't.
Kiting near 8 dolphins. I saw 8 dolphins kind of like do one of these synchronized dives in front of me. I was like, I'm gonna go that way now. Like you guys do your thing over there. I'm gonna go over here.
They're your friends. Flipper loves you. How many?
Flipper is way bigger than me.
All right, listen, if you are a listener and you get the Flipper context, let us know. If you watched Flipper or Herbie, let us know. You too can ourselves with us. Yeah. So anyways, long story short, I like that approach. I'm going to have to adopt it, because one of the things I've been really struggling with is like, there are very specific ways that I like new projects to be implemented. And sometimes it'll get it right, and then sometimes I just have to fight it constantly.
Well, so for that, I have another thing for you. It's a website called cursorrules.org or something. I just Googled Cursor Rules, and it has rules about everything. So if you say, hey, I have a Svelte kit project with this database on the back end and Tailwind, then it gives you like 1,000 list of rules. You can give it general software engineering rules. One of them was really funny. It actually said, pretend you're Elon Musk. And it gave like a list of 5 Elon Musk behaviors, and the AI must do it the Elon Musk way. So that was kind of hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, that actually, I shared this with you, but I want to share it with our audience. The other day I was getting really pissed off at Cursor because it had started doing because sometimes it'll get stuck in a TikTok mode where you're like, that's not how it works, fix it. And then you give it input, and it'll go do something, and it'll be wrong. And so then you correct it on that side, and it goes back to what it was doing.
I've had that where it just doesn't listen to your instructions. It's like, no, dude, there's instructions. Never use any in TypeScript. Like never, ever, ever. Never cast things.
No. So fine, and I realized like I need to like take a breath when I get super angry at these things because they do cost me money when they screw this up, you know? And so finally was like, all right, listen, here's the deal. I want you to talk like a Southern Baptist fire and brimstone preacher for the duration of our conversation. Thanos, it
Yeah.
was incredible. It was the best thing that happened all day. Let me pull up some of the choice things that this
When the
thing.
robots take over, you're gonna be in trouble for that one.
Oh, dude, I'm so done. I said, I want you to talk like a Southern Baptist holy roller preacher for the rest of this session. Claude's response: Hallelujah, brothers and sisters. Can I get an amen? We have been delivered from this unholy linting errors that were plaguing our sacred code. The Lord has blessed us this day by cleansing our test file of those sinful unused imports and variables. Glory be.
Is that the eighth deadly sin, unused imports?
I mean,
I like it.
It is truly, it finishes with, can I get a witness? Is there anybody here who's felt the burden of linting errors being lifted from their shoulders? Testify.
Have you ever played with Elon Musk AI Grok?
No, I haven't.
So you should absolutely download this. It has a voice mode. And in the voice mode, you can give it, there's like conspiracy mode and there is off the rails mode.
Jesus.
And boy, does it mean it. The off the rails mode is hilarious. You can just give it some ideas and just shoot the breeze with it. And it's just amazing and hilarious. And it would make this podcast inaccessible to most audiences if we played any of this here. So
I 100%
do not do this at work.
Oh, it's that bad.
Yeah, no.
Right,
it's marked NSFW, so you'll see it when you do it. But
God. Okay. All right. That's something.
No constraints.
When they're actively marking it in NSFW, that's not for human consumption.
It is off the rails and then some. It was just hilarious.
Yeah. And so I have also started keeping a text file on my desktop that I've termed "shit Claude said." Shit Claude said.txt. This one I've done enough of these and screenshot and whatnot that I'm like, I need to keep track of this stuff. Recently, I was actually with the ChromaDB RAG server. What was I telling it to do? There was a set of warnings that kept popping up, and I was pretty concerned about them. And I said, I'd like for you to address these warnings, right? So it said, the changes I've made fix the LangChain deprecation warning by using the correct import from Chroma, removing the incorrect import from LangChain Chroma, using the correct class in the code. That's all good, right? Number 2, disabled ChromaDB telemetry to get rid of this warning.
Yeah, nicely done, Chad.
Like, what? And I said, I don't like you disabling things that get rid of warnings. And it said, you're right. Let me revert that change. It's better to be informed about what's happening than to silence warnings. Oh,
you think?
It literally tried to shut down all of the telemetry logging that was telling me what was happening.
I had a similar one where the test was not passing, and I said, well, no, that's still not passing, still not passing, still not passing. I was being lazy instead of telling it what was wrong. And at some point, it's like, well, fine, I'll just disable the test. Like, no,
don't do that.
No, that's not your role here. At the time, it was like some TypeScript error was thrown up, and it tried to do this, it tried that, and tried the other. And it's like, okay, we'll just change TypeScript so it doesn't check for these errors altogether for the whole project.
I didn't do that recently, where I'm like, all right, well, let's make this better. So it was something, let's make this better. And it turned the entire project from TypeScript to JavaScript, but it never changed the .ts extension and then deleted the file.
Oh, yeah. I think I know where this comes from, because if you go back to like our Stack Overflow years, remember when you had to look for Stack Overflow for things? You'd find out like I'm getting this warning or this error, and oftentimes, like 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20 questions, the top answer would be, like, we'll just disable it. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, that just disables the warning. It doesn't fix it.
Yeah.
So maybe
Wow.
it's trained on some of that stuff.
Oh, you 100%.
But on the flip side, they're also like super differential. And when you correct, it's like, well, absolutely, that is the best idea ever. I was reading an Ars Technica article this morning that where the AI, when the user corrected about something, it went like this. It said, "Oh my God, I have to just stop right here, mid thought, mid processing, because what you just said, it's different. Not just regular comment. No, it's tectonic shift. It's one of those moments where future historians will pull dusty records and say, here, this was the pivot." It's like,
what? What did they know? Yeah, like. I did play around after the preacher thing. I played around with it and I told Claude that he was a malevolent demon that I had enslaved to my will that would respond in regularly oblique, threatening ways. That was actually, it got a little disturbing because I was
well,
like,
no wonder it missed your channel ID if you're like way confused.
this was later. This was later. Yeah, it is interesting though how their personalities will shift. Did you hear that Sam Altman came out when they released the new ChatGPT models? And one of the big things was they had updated the personality of GPT 4.0. And then like a week later, Sam Altman goes, yeah, we're going to make that personality not suck as much as it does again. Like, oh my God. It was apparently too deferential. So.
It does do that. So that's kind of, I have to be careful sometimes when I phrase it. When I'm pretty sure it's going the wrong way, I'll tell it what I think and why I think it, and, you know, ask it to verify it just in case. Because sometimes it'll just agree and do what you said. And sometimes I've caught it where, you know, it gave me something that I thought was completely wrong, and I was wrong. And then we went with my solution, and then eventually I figured out, oh crap, like what it said actually had some good reasoning, and now I actually need to do it, but it just said, oh, the user says this, so it must be a good idea. Yeah. So it's kind of funny to how to position it so it's doing the best of, you know, you and it together.
Yeah. So what else has been going on? Do you have any specific lovely fails or?
I think those, I mean, sometimes the fail that I see most commonly is sometimes it just goes into a funk and it just fails with like a really basic task. Though I gotta say, I haven't seen this with my prompts with Klein and the prompts I was describing earlier. I haven't seen this as much as I was seeing it with Cursor back in the day. So for some reason, this combination seems to be dealing with prompts and remembering things better. I'm tentatively coming to the conclusion that like shoving all these things in the prompt is expensive, but if you have a big context window and it's not like an insane amount of stuff, it does give you better results and does keep it more focused.
I think the context window on ChatGPT 04 is like 1 million tokens.
Yeah, I think I have something similar on, I'm using like Claude 3.7, and I think it's something
3.7 I think is like 250,000. Claude 3, or maybe 500,000. Claude 3.7 Opus is 1 million.
Yeah, but it really takes a long time to get to 200,000. Like,
oh, it depends. Have you ever let it run tests?
How much test output do you have?
So here's the thing. Periodically, it will be useful for me to allow Claude or Cursor to run tests for me, where it is then able to read the entire output because the entire output gets put into the context window.
Yeah, but I think that's where you fix it, because if you run tests once, like you can use the summarization feature saying, okay, what we've done in this chat, can you summarize it? Because it's good at that. And then you stick that in your active context, and then you can start afresh and say, okay, now let's run the test. And now you only have like the context plus the test, so you can basically stay focused on that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've realized that I've seen with Claude now enough that I know that something will go on is it is supposed to ask for permission to run commands, right? It obviously asks for permissions to make code changes, but it's also supposed to ask for permissions to do things on the shell. And furthermore, it is Cursor or Claude and Cursor are both limited when they're in command line mode. What's interesting is that Claude is able to curl things if you do not have auto accept on, But if you have auto accept on, Claude won't curl anything. Ostensibly, it's to prevent Claude from doing something stupid like downloading a virus, right? Which you would then, you would see it download. You're like, what are you doing? Don't do this. But there is a weird failure state where even though you have not told Claude to execute things on your behalf, it will just start doing it. And so
I haven't had this with Klein. I've only let it read files, and then I kind of scrutinize everything else that it does.
There's
don't trust it to run things yet.
At some point, if you let it do big operations like run tests, it's almost like, oh, I have permission now to run the test as much as I want. And so I've definitely had times where this thing just starts doing stuff that I don't want it to do. And it's not in auto accept mode. It's somehow flipped into a weird state where it just does things. And
yeah, you should try Klein. I'm super happy with it.
Yeah.
And it ties straight to your API key, so you're not paying Cursor every week sort of separately on that.
That's
so
good.
I don't know.
That's good. Yeah.
You can hook it up with any kind of AI that you want in the background. So that's nice in that way.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Bubbling it up a level, I think one of the things that I've been toying around with this idea over the past few weeks, and I've been writing a lot of posts about this, is I think now that we can do this coding with the AI, it really speeds up that very innermost loop, right? It doesn't speed up the whole software development process, but it does make one part of it a lot more efficient and effective. Again, assuming you're doing the right things. I'm not talking about vibe coding here, but I'm assuming you're giving it some guidance. But what I'm finding is that this now begins to highlight all the flaws everywhere else. So if you have crap code, crap architecture, the AI is not going to perform as well because it's looking at that code and that architecture and trying to replicate some of the things that you have in there. And it's unable to sort of make more sense of it or keep good boundaries and make good decisions in that. If you're a small team and you have problems with PR reviews or tests or CI/CD pipelines or whatnot, it tends to like amplify these or highlight these problems as you start hitting them, and you're seeing like, yeah, I can write the code faster, but the results aren't getting any faster because I'm hitting bottlenecks here, here, and here. So part of the work that I've been doing is figuring out where those things lie in any given project, and then sort of tackling those and getting those out of the way. So in one project, for example, we have like really bad types because it was Python and it was working with MyPy, and MyPy never worked quite right. So now that's shifting to Pyrite. And the AI does some dumb shit because it sees like, oh, it has like this really dumb code over here. Let me do the same thing. It's like, no, that's bad code. So I have to put in the context, like saying like, hey, these folders, good examples, these folders, bad examples, don't copy stuff from there. But I think that's where teams are going to find out that maybe you can do more with less engineers, but you still, if you have any structural problems in culture, in process, in technology, in architecture, you still need to address those to really get the benefits of AI. Otherwise, you have in the crap in, crap out kind of situation.
Yeah. I've come to a similar conclusion, and I will like caveat this with, I hate tests. Like, I hate tests with a passion. And I know you've seen this incredible vehement disdain that I have for tests. And I hate tests right up until the point that I'm ready to push to production, at which point I love tests, right? But the amount of time throughout my career that I have just spent wrangling tests that were poorly written it's too much.
Yeah, the problem is that if you wait to do the test till you're ready to push to production, you're too late. Because if you have stuff in production,
well, I mean,
that doesn't have tests, you have no assurance that changes you've made, the tests will still be reflective of what's happening in prod.
Yeah. What I mean is if you know that your tests are good, when you go to push to production, you're not standing there hoping you didn't just accidentally do something stupid. And so, the thing that I've really started to realize though is like, these coding agents, the things that we're using now, these AIs to code they're fast. God, they're fast. But it's like having the fastest mediocre developer you've ever seen, right? And so you need a set of guardrails that's going to tell the mediocre developer, don't be stupid. And one of the, I mean, very obviously, like all of a sudden, it's like, oh, well, tests are more important now than they were, because you used to be able to kind of rely on the engineer to kind of say, oh, that's a stupid idea. But if you have a mediocre developer that can write 100 times the amount of code that a senior could, like that's incredibly powerful. But also, they need the guardrails, and so tests become important. But the other thing I've been really thinking about is setting up some kind of like MCP server that runs an agent. And the entire purpose of that agent is to be a really aggressive code reviewer before push. Meaning it's not necessarily a flag to say you can't push because the reviewer doesn't agree, but to get some kind of adversarial feedback from for the mediocre engineer, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that, because for me, it sort of already works in the micro levels. So for example, things that I would do as mistakes is, I didn't look up the signature of this method and I called it with the wrong parameters, right? Now that will throw a type error, that will throw like a linter error, and the AIs are usually smart enough to look those things up, right? So it's better than I am at sort of like wiring things together, right? If it has a function that gets these inputs and these outputs, it's pretty good at filling in the gaps and doing what it's supposed to do.
Right.
What it's not good at is saying, hey, I've done this 3 times over, you need to pull this in a function here. Or no, this thing is okay to have it 3 times over because they're kind of independent and they will migrate over time, and be like the more high level sort of architectural, managing complexity, dealing with things that it takes a seasoned senior person that has seen this a bunch of times and know what kind of failures you'd expect to see from these things, right? It's the moving up to the levels of abstraction of what this thing does. And it's unclear to me we've reached the point where we could make an MCP server that will do this, right? I think we could give it some, guidelines and some rules. And if you look at like cursor rules, you probably find some architectural stuff that says, do these kind of things, not these kind of things.
Yeah.
But oftentimes you have to say, it has a lot of rules, and then you're making a small change, and it didn't pay attention to the one that was important. And you as the human has to go and say, no, this is an important rule for this situation. Now go apply it, and they will do the right thing. But that's where we come in as the value add and fix those sort of things.
Well, I part of me when I, as I've started thinking through this is you wouldn't use the same type of model for this that you would necessarily use for regular coding. You would want a thinking model versus something that's just really good at zero shot code writing. And the idea here is like, okay, well, maybe we're writing all of our code relatively zero shot, meaning we're just going to plow through it. We're not going to take time to think about it in the model sense. But then your reviewer is going to be something that's very high level. It's going to look over the code and is going to do the thinking with a set of rules that you set up in advance. And like I said, it's not there to block any kind of a commit, but it, think about it this way. It's a little bit of the like observer principle, where the sheer act of observing something changes it. And so if you know that every time you're about to commit code, we're going to go double check it with this thing, and it comes back with a valid, it's like, hey, you did this way. Maybe you should do it this way. It would be, I wonder if it would be a useful thing. I don't know that it will be, but there's, basically.
Yeah.
Let's just do it. So,
but I think, again, it's figuring out how to ask the right question at the right time. So you and I have been working on this testing thing, and one of the things that was occurring to me was, I'm not sure that we're looking, are we asserting the right things? Like, is it the test that we write for this little module, is it doing the right things? Right. So what I want to do later today is go ask the AI, hey, look at this file and tell me for this, React component, what are the assertions we should be having, and see what it comes up with. Does it come up with the right stuff? Because if I look at it like it's like a drop-down control, I would say like, okay, is it putting the right things in it? Is it rendering it? Does it filter correctly? Does it select the right thing when you're done at the end? Like, there's 3 or 4 things that I could rattle off the top of my head. Right. Yeah. Now, when you say, please write tests for this, that may be too far removed from, okay, figure out what things we need to assert, and then write tests that assert these things. Maybe a much better way of phrasing it for you to get the results that we want. And that maybe if you're doing as a 2-step gives you the ability to interject in the middle before it goes off and spends 50 cents in writing some, junk tests for things that would never happen.
I actually had this happen yesterday where I had it write up a set of tests for a component I was working on. And the first time it actually went in, when I had it write the tests, it went in and wrote, it tested the states, right? So the use state calls where it would double check that if we had a change here, we would get the expected change over here, right? And I feel like that's a very, very useful test. And then later on, I said, I need you to add some tests. Next thing I know, this thing's like testing whether or not it's going to render, where it's like, I don't know that that's as valuable a test. Like rendering's
Yeah, I mean,
great.
if you had like a conditional render, you might want to make sure that you're rendering it based on this conditional or not. But like, is the whole thing going to render? It may be a low value test.
But it was low value because it was just double checking that it would render, which
I mean, if you have like a happy case path where you just render the whole thing and check that 3 things are there, maybe that could be it.
But the point being is like, it didn't know what a good test was. It was just writing tests.
But I wonder if like the development is we're going to get these specialized agents that understand specific aspects, right? So maybe this is an agent that understands how to write front end React tests. And we can develop a methodology and say, okay, well, there's use state and there's a few other hooks, and this is how we kind of like to test those. And then that becomes its specialization.
Yeah.
And we can then string those together.
There's a real opportunity for model distillation here, where if you distill correctly, you probably could start generating models that are very, very small and very, very good at specific things. So like, you've got, what is it? Quinn 72B coder instruct or something is actually a
72C, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
72B is the billion parameters, sir. There is no 72C. I need you to get on to the numbers correctly.
I believe
maybe. Really, I don't know. That's a lot of parameters. So anyways, it happens to be like, it's really good at Python. Like really good at Python. It's when I build coding agents, it tends to be the one that I use just because it's small, it's fast, and it's not expensive to run. And the Python code, it turns out, is actually on par with something like O3 Mini, right?
Okay.
And the only issue I have when I'm building a coding agent with that particular model is that the context window is a lot smaller. And so it'll blow itself up periodically. Anyways, long story short is it's probably a case to be made that you could distill down, take a model that's strong at coding to begin with, and then distill it with a bunch of testing examples that you like. And all of a sudden you probably get something that's relatively small, might even run on your local machine through Olama, and will write the test for you, do like a really phenomenal job.
Yeah, I guess that. So, I mean, if we want to start thinking about wrapping here, maybe like one way I think about this is, right, do we have bottlenecks? Like we have the coding process, and we've talked a lot about the limitations of the AI to produce this code faster, and then we have the limitations around that: team, culture, process, architecture. Are we focusing here, and we're now going to have like a super fast coding thing, but like no abilities around the org or team to absorb all these changes? Or are we going to make this good enough that it fixes some of these problems that are out here, or are we going to make this too fast where you can fix the inner loop, but we'll need to turn our attention also to doing AI or not AI ways of fixing the outer loop to get the results that we want, right? Because until it code's in production and it's in the hands of the customer, we're not delivering value.
Right. I'm here to tell you that I know from experience that you can have the absolute best tech writing the code, but if you have structural and team problems, there ain't no AI that's going to fix that.
Especially not yet, but I expect as that becomes the focus, then we will turn our attention to it and get better at that as well.
But like, there is a dysfunctional team, which I have worked on, is the ultimate trump card for failure. Like with a dysfunctional team, it's very, very difficult to win, right? I don't think the only way that AI fixes a dysfunctional team is by getting rid.
Well, I mean,
making them redundant.
We could pick this on a separate podcast because I think this is a pretty big topic. Yes, there's different reasons for dysfunction, right? I think if you have like a corrosive environment where it's like actual personnel problem, yeah, you're not going to fix that. But you
That's
could
my
have
point. AI is not going
a
to
lot of teams are just busy and overworked, and they're like nice, good people that work well together, but they're unable to do stuff because they're just following patterns that they've always been doing. And that's a lot of my work of figuring that stuff out and figuring out what the bottlenecks are and helping the teams clean that up. So I think there are probably ways you could plane that, but I think that could actually be a really fun topic for next time.
I think it would be. Let's do it. Let's do it. So, all right, humans of Earth, thank you for coming along on. God, sorry, it's a little hard on the vocal cords.
Let the AI give you a cough drop.
Claude is not going to fix that. Humans of Earth, there's no deep humans of Earth. We hope that you have enjoyed our show. We ask that you would rate, like, subscribe, do all the amazing things. Ping Thanos on Threads or LinkedIn, wherever he is, and tell him if you like his new tan from his kiteboarding days. It's very, he's definitely like 1 or 2 shades darker. It's amazing. So, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next time.